pulls off a pretty strong showing in the first round of the country's presidential elections. Now, though, she's headed into a runoff against a centrist candidate, Emmanuel Macron, and it's just 2 weeks to go, and experts are saying she can not win at all. Well, my panel has different thoughts. Joining me now, Brian Cattell, Nile Gardiner, and Ford O'Connell is back. Now, let me start with you. I thought it was fascinating, and I don't think many people know that Le Pen won the two youngest age categories in the general election and overwhelmingly won amongst the working class.
Yeah, without a doubt, of course, Marine Le Pen did have strong appeal to working class voters and to many younger voters, but she certainly faces a huge uphill struggle in terms of defeating Emmanuel Macron in the second round. And after all, Macron basically, I think, is now the establishment candidate in France. Several of the other defeated candidates have endorsed Macron, and even though he's described actually as a centrist politician, he is a typical sort of champagne socialist French leader. And he represents in many ways actually a continuation, in fact, of Francois Hollande's government. But the polls certainly project Macron far in the lead over Le Pen. So it's going to be a very, very difficult task for her to overturn this poll lead that Macron has.
But Paul, Brian, I think the interesting point is that on election night, Macron is celebrated with this lavish dinner at a glitzy, ritzy restaurant, oysters and champagne, and the leftists in France were appalled. I mean, again, to Niall's point, this is exactly what they've rejected with Hollande. So is it possible maybe a wild card could be the communist candidate who had a lot in common with Le Pen with respect to rejection or at least the reforms of NATO, the euro, and some other major establishment institutions?
Well, I think Niall's absolutely spot on, Charles. You know, Macron is a champagne socialist, and the interesting thing in France now is we're in uncharted territory, so it's actually very hard for the pollsters to extrapolate, because the party system as it existed before has essentially been destroyed. You've got two candidates that don't have the backing of any mainstream party. So the assumption that the mainstream endorsements that Macron's getting is just going to translate into this landslide, I think that is there to be challenged and possibly overturned. But look, Le Pen does face a huge uphill battle, but Macron is untested. This guy has never even won a town council election. This is his first election, and I think he's going to come under an incredible amount of scrutiny, and people are going to see whether his policies add up. Yeah, you know, Ford, part of that scrutiny is going to be his marriage to a significantly older woman who was a school teacher, and some believe some sort of Svengali, where she's doing all of the thinking. She comes from a very wealthy family. He himself was a Rothschild banker, exactly what the folks in Europe are saying they don't want anymore.
Well, this is definitely coming down. You're absolutely right. He's got a very questionable marriage to a much older woman there, and you're absolutely right about his ties to banking exec. This is going to come down to sort of globalism versus nationalism. And look, I think that nationalism's on the rise in France as it is in the rest of Europe. I'm just not sure that the votes are there for Le Pen to get across the finish line. But if she does win, get ready for Frexit, okay, and the long-term standing power of the EU being in jeopardy. I will say something else, Charles. There's something here that's far more interesting, which Brian pointed out, is this is the first time since 1958 that neither standard party candidate made it to the runoff. So guess what? Political elites are in danger, and if Le Pen can paint Macron as a political establishment, guess what? She might get a last-minute boost.
No, I don't think that's going to be hard for her to do, to be quite frank with you. Maybe 2 weeks is not enough time, but I think the image is already out there.
Well, the image is already out there, but I think that she may need something else, like what happened right before the first election. Maybe there's a terrorist attack. Maybe there's some unforeseen circumstance that gets in there. But if it does, she has a shot. Look, I think she's going to lose, but there's always a chance, as Donald Trump showed us, that you can win.
Niall?
I do think that, without a shadow of a doubt, Macron is the establishment candidate. He is the candidate who represents certainly the old guard in Europe now, even though he's a relatively young politician. It is striking, actually, that in the first round, 46% of French voters opted for Eurosceptic candidates. Euroscepticism is certainly very, very strong in France. A big question, though, is whether or not this election is going to deliver a Eurosceptic result. I doubt it because of the scale of the odds in place. But I think the long-term future for France is Euroscepticism. Eventually, I think we will see a French exit from the EU if indeed it does not happen on this occasion.
Yeah, I tend to agree, guys. I think you're probably more than likely what we're seeing is the beginning, not the end of Le Pen, but perhaps the beginning of something that manifests into a serious change later on. I want to alert the audience also, as she just stepped down about an hour or so ago as a head of the National Front leadership. It's a temporary move, I think, of course, to try to expand her range. Thank you, gentlemen, very much. In the meantime, the major averages rallied big time today. Investors, well, of course, they digested